Chapter 12 of The Car. You ready to test her? Wayne stood over the engine, his hands and head covered with grease, where they weren't hidden by his hair. His smile, a cut of white across the dirty face. Terry sat across the cat, one hand on the windshield. It was early morning. They had worked all night. Terry thought he would never correctly sleep again. And the turbocharger was in place. Shining and new-looking, though it had been in the box for perhaps years. It was a simple concept. The exhaust manifold had been removed and replaced with the turbo. When the engine fired, the exhaust gases were expelled through the turbo, which in reality was a fan with a duct that led back to the carburetor. When the engine ran, the expelled gases turned the fan, and that drove high-pressured air into the carburetor, which dramatically increased the power. Or, Terry thought, it was supposed to. But he had never seen anything work this way, and most of what had been done was accomplished by Wayne, who was, as far as Terry could tell, the best mechanic in the world. Or near it. Except that he was just working and didn't say what he was doing. So much of it was still mysterious to Terry. But he nodded. Well, get in. Crank her. Terry slid into the seat and held his breath. Turned the key, pushed it over to start. There was a moment's hesitation, and then the engine fired with a snort and a thundering growl. The cat was just outside the door of the garage, but the sound was so deafening that Susie ran from the trailer to close the garage door and protect herself. "It's loud," Terry said, or yelled, smiling at the same time. It sounded like he thought a car should sound. Hungry. Wayne nodded, leaned over, and yelled back, "That's because we dropped the muffler and put in that swollen piece of pipe to make it reverb a little. The muffler created too much backdraft for the turbo. Rev her a few times." Terry pushed on the accelerator once, twice, and the sound grew, roared, filled the world. Wow. Wayne nodded. "Far out, right? Man, I can dig this thing. Let's go for a ride, see how it works." Terry waited while Wayne got in. Waylon was nowhere to be seen, and Terry supposed that he had gone into the trailer to get some sleep. Wayne closed the door. "You've got to watch it. It will seem the same for the first second or so, but the turbo kicks in fast, and she can get squirrely." Terry nodded, put the cat in reverse, turned around to look over the back, and eased the clutch out. It was loud, but didn't seem much different. "You don't want to give her too much," Wayne started to say, but he was too late. The cat seemed unchanged to Terry, and he pushed on the accelerator. A pause. Half a beat. Then the turbo started pushing air. Mixed it under pressure with the gas in the carburetor, and forced it into the pistons. Both back tires broke loose. There was a screech that nearly broke eardrums, and the cat was suddenly doing 35 miles an hour in reverse. Gas. Waylon finished, his head snapping forward with the acceleration. Terry instinctively cranked the wheel to the right. The car swerved flatly back to the left, whipped around, and he was looking down the driveway over the front end. He clutched, shifted into low, accelerated again, and they were aimed at the road doing almost 50, all in the space of 2 or 3 seconds. On the road he caught third, brought her up to 60, then fourth, and pushed the accelerator where it would have been previously for 70. The cat jumped just under 100 miles an hour, and when he backed down to where it would have been for normal cruising speed, there was over half the pedal still left. "Wow," he said. He shot a quick look at Wayne. "This is incredible. Far out, right? I dig your driving, man. That turn in the driveway was pure Sterling Moss. Terry had slowed to turn around at a wide place in the road. Who's Sterling Moss? Wayne stared at him. You don't know the name? Terry shook his head. Never heard of him. Did he drive or something? Ah, man. Never heard of Sterling Moss. Ugh, this is too much. Sterling Moss was the driver, back in the 60s and 70s. There were people who said his name would live forever when he won the Grand Prix. He could take turns like nobody has ever taken turns. It looked like his inside wheels were bolted to the road. And you don't know him. Ah, man, that crushes. That really crushes. While Wayne was talking, Terry had turned and driven back to the driveway and was now pulling up to the metal building. Waylon came outside when they arrived, drinking a Coke and eating a sandwich. He and Wayne looked at each other. Terry caught the look, and Waylon nodded almost imperceptibly. And Wayne answered the nod. Then he waved a hand toward Terry. He doesn't know who Sterling Moss was. Waylon shook his head. Tragic. But he was smiling softly. Well, damn it, think of it. He loves cars, drives like he was born to it, and doesn't know Sterling Moss. How can that be? Waylon took a sip of Coke. So he never learned about Moss. Exactly my point. My point exactly. He never learned. Wayne took a breath. The question is, my friend, how much other stuff doesn't he know? Waylon nodded slowly. You know what I think? Wayne stood, his hand still waving toward Terry. No. What do you think? Waylon burped. I think we should find out what he doesn't know. There might be a shocking lack of fundamental knowledge here. All this time, Terry had been sitting in the car. One hand draped over the wheel, the motor turned off. How can you do that? I don't know what I don't know. Wayne turned. Simple. We'll ask until we hit a blank. Let's start with... Hell, I don't know. Waylon, what should we start with? Waylon had picked up his guitar, which had been resting against the wall at the side of the door, and tickled the strings, making a sound like rain. Music. Let's ask about music. Wayne nodded, turned to Terry. What do you know about music? Terry shrugged. I don't know. I listen to it. I like some of it. No. Waylon hit a stronger chord. Not the sound. The groups. The writers. The composers. Dylan, Wayne said, raising a hand. Bob Dylan? Terry frowned. No. I don't know him. You don't know Bob Dylan? Waylon moved toward the car. How about Pete Seeger? Terry snapped his fingers. Bob Seeger? I've heard of him. But not Pete? Terry shook his head. Nope. Sorry. Different Seegers, Wayne said. Way different. Ian and Sylvia? Waylon asked. Bud and Travis? Elvis? I know Elvis, of course. And the Beatles? I know of them. I've seen them on old videos. Wayne stopped them. I think we've got a base here. He pretty much doesn't know anything about music before maybe 1980 or 1985, except for Elvis and the Beatles. Waylon nodded. I think you've got it. Which, Wayne said, is the same as not knowing anything. How about Bruce Springsteen? Terry asked. I heard him once. Waylon shook his head. Not real. He came late. Nobody who was anybody listened to him. Move into rock a little, Waylon said. Jimi Hendrix, Jefferson Airplane, Grace Slick. Terry sighed. Nope. Simon and Garfunkel? Nope. God. Wayne wiped his face. It's like he wasn't born or something. I wasn't, Terry pointed out. They were all before I was born. Well, there you are, Wayne noted. That explains it. You weren't around. Books, Waylon said. What books have you read? The ones I have to, for school. Any Steinbeck, Grapes of Wrath, Tortilla Flats? Nope. I watched part of a movie called Grapes of Wrath on television, but it was pretty boring. Boring. Yeah, about a bunch of farmers, and they get into a lot of dust or dirt or something. Is that it? Waylon turned away, struck another chord, then back. That's the right story, but the wrong way to see it, to know it. Don Quixote, Wayne said, leaning over the air. How about a Spanish guy who ran around sticking spears in windmills? Terry held up his hands. Sorry, I've never heard of it. History, Waylon said suddenly. Let's try history. Washington, Jefferson. Terry brightened. I've heard of them, of course. What have you heard? Well, like that Washington won the Revolutionary War, and Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, and they were both presidents. But other than that, about the men, well, I guess not much. That Washington became very wealthy by swindling his own soldiers out of land and had wooden teeth and many slaves, or that Jefferson died in virtual bankruptcy. You've never heard that? No. The Civil War? Terry leaned back. I can't think of anything. You know, right off the top? The West. Cowboys and Indians, like that. Yes. Well, just that. I've seen old movies. But no reading about it. No. For a full minute, there was silence. Terry heard a bird's song that seemed to match the chords Waylon had been picking. Then another half a minute passed, nobody saying anything until Wayne coughed. America. He needs to find America. Waylon looked at him and slowly nodded. That's what he needs. To go and see it. And find it. Wayne pushed. Like we did, you know, after the war. After the war, Waylon repeated. Yeah, you gotta go trucking. Trucking, Terry cut in. I don't know anything about trucking. No, Wayne stopped him. That's what we used to call it, traveling. We went trucking. That's what you need to do. Go see America. Truck on out. No, Waylon said, turning to put his guitar back in the case. It's what we need to do. We need to go trucking. We? Yeah. You've got to come with us. You've got to go find it again. You take baby. Wayne looked at Waylon, studied his eyes, then looked down at Terry and back up and grinned. Yeah, you're right. We've got to go find it again, man. See if it's still there. Right on. It's time for me and baby to ride. Terry sat in the car, looking up at the two men, wondering what they were doing to his life. Who, he asked, is baby? And that's the end of chapter 12.